Welcome to the official channel of Woodbine Modern School. This is your biology class of class 10th, lecture 2 of chapter 7, Control and Coordination. So, I have listed the topics, and the topic which we have already covered is animal nervous system, and inside that the subtopic what happens in reflex action. This is we have covered, and today in this particular lecture we will be learning about human brain. How are these tissues, I mean the brain tissues or the nervous tissues, are being protected, and how does the nervous tissue cause action. So, human brain. The spinal cord, as I have told earlier, and you have seen the function of a spinal cord in the reflex arc, that it's kind of a first aid thing, or sometimes it has to have take decision on the behalf of brain. So it's made up of nerves, or you can see the neuron part, and it what it does, the supply of information, and it constitute the complex mechanism and neural connections. You have seen this complex mechanism earlier in the form of reflex arc, and these are concentrated where in the brain, because it has to communicate with the brain ultimately, and that's why it's a main coordinating center for the body. The brain and the spinal cord both combinedly constitute the CNS, that is central nervous system of our body or human body, and they receive the information from different parts or different sensor muscles or sensor parts, you can say precisely, and they integrate it means they articulate it, or you can say they help us to perform the function whatever needed in suitable conditions. So continuing, like for example, writing, talking, moving a chair, or clapping at the end of any program, these are what? These are the examples of voluntary actions. Students, voluntary actions are what? Those actions which we perform after thinking or which include thought processes, they are known as voluntary actions. For example, as I have mentioned here, that clapping means what, you have gone to see any movie or any action or any something, any drama or singing, and after the completion of that particular activity or program, you decided to clap, or maybe you felt like, okay, this action or this particular event need to be appreciated. So we usually do what we used to have to do clapping. So for that, we first observe the performance, and then we articulate it in our brain, okay, I liked it or not. Either I like, so I'll have to clap. So these are the actions which we are performing after we think over our activity. So those actions which we perform after thinking are known as voluntary actions, and these are based on what the deciding factor is there. So the brain has to send a message to the muscles. Why? Because we need to clap. If we need to clap, then we need to use our hands, and to move our hands we need the muscles. So brain first think that I need to clap, and then that message, the brain transfer it to our muscles, and then our muscles perform the action. So this is the second way how the nervous system communicates to the muscle. First way, student, you have already seen in the reflex arc that how the muscles can act as an effector muscles, and now here there's a second way how these muscles can perform other functions as well, like voluntary actions. And now the communication between the central nervous system and these effector muscles, or you can say the effector parts, which will ultimately perform the function, need to be facilitated by what? By peripheral nervous system, that is PNS of our body. So PNS is what? Peripheral nervous system is simply the communication bridge between the CNS and the other parts of the body, which will receive the signal from the brain. So these communication need to be done via nerves. So there are nerves involved, which is being named cranial nerves, that arises from brain, and spinal nerves that arises from the spinal cord. So cranial nerves and spinal nerves both constitute the peripheral nervous system. So first was CNS, central nervous system, that constitutes the brain and the spinal cord. Other is the PNS, that is peripheral nervous system, which constitute what? Which constitute the spinal nerves and cranial nerves. Okay, so this is how the brain allows to think and to take actions based on thinking. So students, this is a typical diagram of a brain which I have took from NCRT book of yours. So this is the cerebrum part, this is the cranium or the skull. Skull meant to protect these important and delicate organ of our body, that is brain. So cranium is what? Cranium is the skull, the hard part, which when we touch, then we can feel the hard part, and that constitutes the skull. This is the cerebrum part. You can see the bushy part over here, the top of the brain. This is what? This is cerebrum. So cerebrum is present just beneath the cranium or the skull. Next is what? Forebrain. So forebrain constitutes the forepart. Forebrain, the name suggests itself that it must be present somewhere here in the forehead part. So this is what? This is forebrain. So now it has hypothalamus, pituitary gland somewhere over here, and now comes the hindbrain. Hindbrain has three parts, that's pons, medulla, and cerebellum. You can see this umbrella flower kind of thing. This is what? This is cerebellum. So the hindbrain constitutes what? The hindbrain constitutes of pons, medulla, and cerebellum. Now there is this spinal cord. You can see the spinal cord constitutes the spinal nerves, and it is just present where? Just present below the brain. Now there's a midbrain. The name suggests itself. Forebrain means what? In the area of forehead region. Midbrain means mid area. Hindbrain means in the hind, on the below region of that. So this all constitutes the brain, or a typical human brain have these parts inside. So we'll see each and every part's function one by one. So first is, you can say that the brain can have mainly three major parts. So three major parts or three major regions, that is, we have seen forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. So forebrain does what? So forebrain is mainly used for the thinking part, means they receive the sensory impulses from various receptors. Mainly students, you can say that forebrain is used to perform functions on the basis or on behalf of the senses which we have, the five senses specifically. And I have listed some of the examples like hearing, smell, sight, so on. So these are separate areas of association where these sensory informations are being interrupted or being used and then being transferred to the receptors, and then it has to be checked from the brain that do I have any memory regarding that. For example, if I smell of a sweet dish, or if I smell of a biryani or something which I have already eaten, then must be I am having a memory of that. So first, if I get the smell of the biryani, then my brain must check with it that do I have any kind of memory regarding this smell, and if I have it, then the signals is being interrupted and then being checked and then being confirmed, okay, now this is the smell of biryani or not. So based on all this, decisions is made in how to respond to the information passed on to the motor areas that control the movement of voluntary muscles. That do I need to proceed with that particular smell, or do I need to hold myself back? However, there are certain sensations that are distinct from seeing or hearing. For example, feeling of fullness, that I have eaten enough, now I'm not in the need to have any meal further. So this feeling of fullness or the feeling of satisfaction is being provided by, again, with the forebrain region. In other use of reflex, we'll see here that of a sudden our mouth starts salivation, of a sudden our heart starts beating, and we don't know why sometimes it happens. So just seeing anything of a sudden, with even we are not giving enough time to our brain to think, before that the salivation starts, before that the heart starts beating. So these are the examples of involuntary actions. So these are the involuntary actions, the actions which is being performed without thought process or without the involvement of thinking, is being controlled by midbrain and hindbrain, and these actions are known as what? Involuntary actions. So students, I have told you earlier that voluntary actions are what? Voluntary actions are those actions which we include the thought processes or the actions which we perform after thinking, known as voluntary, and those actions which are being performed without any thought process or thinking are known as involuntary actions, and these are controlled by midbrain and hindbrain region, and the voluntary part was controlled by forebrain region. So for example, whenever we see any bright light, or whenever we face our eyes face any bright light, our eyes automatically closes. Why? Because the pupil need to get protected or adjusted according to the light. So without thinking, our just eye starts blinking, or the eye perform actions regarding that particular light. So this is an example of what? Involuntary action. So now walking in a straight line, riding a bicycle means what? Those activities which need a long practice and then we tend to do in our day-to-day life. These all things are, or these all activities are being performed by a part of hindbrain which we have seen earlier called cerebellum, which is what? Cerebellum. Cerebellum does what? Cerebellum is responsible for precision of voluntary actions, means those actions which we tend to do, but it is now in our practice of day-to-day life, and it also helps in maintaining the posture and balance of the body. So now the topic comes, how are these tissues protected? We have seen the functions that these tissues are very much crucial and important for our human body functioning. So there must be a mechanism to control or to protect them. So brain is a very delicate organ, so it needs to protect it from any shock or from any accident or any injury. So this brain is being protected because it is inside a bony box that is known as cranium or skull, which I have shown you earlier, and there is a fluid filled balloon which provides the further shock absorption. There is the presence of CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, outside the brain and in between the skull, so that these fluid filled part need to be work as shock absorber. So now if you run your, again, this is the cranium or the skull will protect the brain. Now what about the spinal cord, which is present below the brain? For that there is a hard bumpy structure at the back of which we can feel at our back, that is known as vertebral column or backbone, which protects the spinal cord. So brain is protected by cranium or skull, and the spinal cord is being protected by vertebral column or backbone. Now the question comes, how does the nervous tissue cause action? We have seen several examples where the nervous tissue was causing action, and you know that how these actions are being performed. So first is the reflex arc, which we have seen earlier, that without thinking, just you need to act on it. And the second, which we have studied, that first we will think, first we will absorb analysis, and then we will articulate, or we will facilitate the function according to that. So processes the information, makes decision based on information, and conveys decision to muscle for action. So first the brain will what process, collect the information, then it process and then make decision based on information and convey the decision. In other words, when the action or movement is to be performed, then the muscle tissues will do the final job. So how does this muscle cell move? So students, you must have learned earlier in your earlier classes in class 9 that how the muscle cells move and what constitute the muscle cells, and further you will also be studying this part majorly in class 11 regarding the muscle cell movements. So mainly for the now you can know that muscle cells, mainly the actin and myosin, these are the proteins which are responsible for the movement of muscles, and this actin and myosin particularly work on the command of brain, and it leads to the movement of muscles. So thank you students, this was all about the human brain and the tissues associated with it, and the spinal cord, and all other nervous tissues, and the functions whatever they are performing. So we will be meeting in the further lecture. Thank you.